What's your perspective on innovation relative to goals of the organization from a profit point of view?
Innovation is at the core of almost everything we do. If you're not innovating, you're not moving forward. You're staying where you are. Based on just, our economy, it's a capitalistic economy. Someone else wants your lunch, right? And that's the way it's going to be. Sometimes engineers might be inventing something new and they don't realize it. Say we got this really hard problem to solve. They go in a room with the architects, they figure out some solution and they start to implement it and they report on it. Product managers like, did anyone go over with legal, check in with legal to see if this is innovative, this is worthy of a patent?
Have you always picked companies that were in that direction? Because it's not true everywhere.
One particular startup I worked for, we were innovating on cell phones, doing 3D interactive emojis. We built cool technology to capture the facial motion, and our team did have patents around that. But what we failed to patent was some of the cool stuff we did with lip syncing.
Hello, Lear. How are you?
I'm great.
Good.
Ahito. You too. How are you?
I'm all right. Where is that, by the way? That sounds like that's an interesting background.
Oh, this is my man cave.
Nice.
Yeah,
I cave it is.
It's a garage, but I got a pool table in here and a spin bike and darts and music, giant TV right behind you, which you can't see. So
it sounds like basically every bar.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a mix of bars. Oh, nice.
Really nice pool table and ping pong top we can put on it. My son likes to play when he has his friends over here. They'll put the ping pong table out and do stuff with red cups. I'm not really fully aware what they do.
Yeah, I have no idea about that.
I have no idea what they do. They use ping pong balls, a lot of them for some reason in that game. I don't know.
Maybe it's a North American version of table tennis. Who knows?
Maybe.
Probably popular in colleges.
Yeah.
Well, let me introduce you a bit. So this is Larry McDonough, or McDonough. Is that how you say it?
McDonough.
Oh, So yeah. Anyway, this is Larry McDonough, and among many things, he's been a software engineer. He's been in product. I think you've been at VMware. You've done a lot of sort of like visual programming and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But right now he is director of product at Procore Technologies.
Procore.
Procore. Procore Technologies. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and the first one is, I guess, the most obvious, which is, what does the director of product do?
Oh gosh, good question. So I had this role in my last company as well, so it seems to be fairly consistent across high tech companies. But a director of product is responsible for probably, I would say, more of the strategy of the product necessarily than the implementation. So reporting into the director of product typically are a few product managers. My current role, I have 3 senior product managers. Actually, 2 of them are principal technical product managers, which is pretty high up in the PM role.
Right.
And but for me, I'm responsible for overall strategy, and I keep an eye on how our product's moving along as well in terms of how well we're executing. I manage resources. Budgeting, not as much. I would say it's been my experience that, we get a budget, got to work within it, but a lot of the financial budgeting stuff tends to happen, at the VP level.
Right. So for each, you said you had, is it 3 or 2 people?
I have 3.
3 and 2 are technical, right?
2 are very technical, yes.
Very. So for you, what do you see? Because I think you also came from more of a technical background into product. So what do you see is the sort of like difference in perspective between people who come from a technical background into product and people who don't?
Oh, great question as well. So a lot of it depends on the actual industry and product you're in. So I've been staying in technical, with technical products and software products. And I would say that the technical product managers, or the people that have experience with actually building code, the one advantage they bring is a deeper level of sympathy and understanding with the engineering team, right? So you can also communicate better sometimes. There's disadvantages, and I'll get to those in a second, but another advantage is that they can also recognize I don't want to say this on air, but it's kind of bullshit if it happens. Like so, if there's any particular sandbagging going on, or there's some. I've been very
What's sandbagging, by the way, for
well,
the
like,
audience?
this is going to take us 8 weeks to build this feature. And if you're
Right, right.
familiar with how things work, you go, show me how.
Yeah,
I want to see. I don't
exactly.
quite get that, right? Now,
Right, right,
sometimes you could be, they could be right. And in most cases, the companies I've been working with recently, I've worked with excellent engineers. I've not had any of that, but it's always good to have someone that can kind of, get back an estimate from engineering and kind of like have a way to logically recognize whether that makes sense. And if there isn't,
right,
if something doesn't make sense, they can kind of drill in a little deeper, right?
right,
The advantage of someone who is maybe not technical is that if they have to have something else in addition, right? It helps to understand technology to communicate, of course. So there's a certain base level you need, but if you don't have a technical background, you can bring other things to the table. So one of them is a really strong, ability to understand your customer, right, and um, be able to understand what they actually need in the product and do a really strong job of market analysis, customer analysis, competitive analysis, and some of those things are a little foreign to someone who was a developer before, right?
right,
So there's kind of some different advantages that each type of product manager can bring. I like having a mixture, right? So they can learn from
right,
each other. I
right,
think that's important to have a team where each member of the team, can be the sort of, the expert in their area. So they feel good about being able to add value, but also be able to learn from the others and have an open mind to like, oh, this person's really strong at, doing customer, research or discovery, right? And I can learn from them,
right.
and vice versa.
Right. So is there, I mean, this might just be incidental, but is there any meaning in that, in having two and two technical, one sort of, I guess, more product focused or more market and consumer focused, or it's just happenstance? Or is there, and basically, is there one you lean towards more for one reason or another?
Kind of depends on the job. If the role is working closely with, if the product is APIs, okay,
Right.
so that's very close to engineering. You probably wouldn't want someone who doesn't have experience with actually building and writing APIs themselves, right?
So
Now,
why is that important? So why is
because
that? Because
so
at the end of the day,
because
yeah,
so much of the product involves around the tech, right?
right,
Yeah, there's a customer component as well. There's consumers, there are developers that are consuming APIs, so you have to understand them, and that again helps to be technical. Now, in my team, and this was true at VMware as well, but also at Procore, is we're responsible for our marketplace, right? And our
right,
marketplace is it's a web portal that contains solutions that customers can come to browse and acquire. And that marketplace management isn't quite as technical as an API. In fact, the persona that a marketplace targets is really the end customer, right? So you have to kind of
right.
understand the customer side of it, not so much the developer side of it. So I would say that the need for technical background really aligns with the persona of the product.
Right. Persona of the product. And when it's an API, the persona of the product is technically a developer.
That's right.
So that
Right.
interface,
So
the translation layer,
exactly.
you're right. Interesting. So if I move over more to the product side, in terms of the skill set there, which is really interesting because sort of, I guess, the bent of the podcast in general is quite techy, but sort of, it's great to have that person who can sort of translate between,
Mhm.
because of your experience and things like that. Uh, could you sort of explain what market analysis, product analysis, and competition analysis is, and like specifically for someone who's in product?
So let me see. So market, competitive, and what was the third one? This product.
Product. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, well, I mean, market and competitive, I'd say, are fairly similar, right?
Right.
So there's the market of opportunity for your product. You got to understand what is the size of that market. Who are
Right.
the players? Who are the potential customers? What's our opportunity? And then inside of that market, there's competitors, right, that also want to
Right.
eat at the same opportunity. So you have to kind of understand the relationship there. Most companies I've worked for in the tech space have a dedicated competitive, analysis team that you can lean on as a product manager.
Right.
So we've been fortunate to have that, but even there, sometimes the area that we need competitive information on is outside the average or normal direction that someone from your corporate competitive would go after, because we're looking at what are their dev tools, and how competitive is their developer environment, and what's their developer experience like, right? So we might need someone who understands the developer side of it, and that often will fall on the product manager in that space, to go
Mm.
mess around, with the competitors' products if they're open, and learn about what they do well. What are they not doing well? What direction do they appear to be going in, and do we care? And how do we differentiate? So all those kind of things.
Right.
I'd say the market analysis is more about opportunity and understanding your customer, and and that helps to in that space. It helps, similar to working with your internal competitive team. This really helps to work with your BD team, your sales team, your
Right.
customer success team, right? So you can find out, we have how are our current customers, um, you know how do they feel about our product, right? So you want to know how they're doing. But there's companies that may have tried the product and left. Like, we want to know why, right? There may be companies we haven't yet acquired that are in our sites, and what is it that might make them come on board. And there's different elements for each of those different cases. There's different teams for each of those different cases, internally. So you got to talk to them, right? Your customer success folks are the ones that are working with the customers we just acquired, right? The salespeople know about
Right.
the deals we lost, and the BD teams, SC teams know about who we're going after. So
Right.
you got to just stay
SC teams being what? BD, I think business development. SC teams
business
being
development, sales engineering. Right.
right. Right.
So sales is out trying to, get a client. They need to bring in some technical person to sort of, explain the benefits to the technical side, who is going to be sitting there thinking, can we, is this product going to solve our purposes? Right. The sales guy makes a
Right.
beautiful pitch, and it sounds, everything's rosy, but, they'll bring in their technical team to kick the tires. And then, so our sales team brings in someone technical to
Right.
respond. And they'll often be the first to know what the product that we have, where it's failing or where it's falling short.
Right.
Right? So they'll be in conversations with them, and understand, they can come back to us and say, hey, we're losing deals because of this thing or this thing. Right. And that's
Right.
important to know.
Right. So, I mean, sort of my summary of this is what people want, what you have, and what other people think people want, basically. So the
Yeah.
competition, and whether they were successful at figuring that out or not.
Yeah.
So, with all these sort of this like circle of concerns, are there like I guess maybe questions or statements or considerations, almost from a more fundamental level, of things that you use to filter out and make decisions?
Um, these would be questions or things, that I would pose to the third parties, or the external players here, or is it things that we're looking at internally?
That's a good point. In my mind, I'm thinking more about you're trying to make a decision on what to do with your product, and you have all these considerations, right? You have the market, you have the competition,
Oh,
and you have the product, right? So one thing could be, hey, let's just do what this person is doing because it's working, right?
okay. All
Or
right. I
you could
see where you're
say,
going. Yeah. Yeah. So,
right, or you could say, hey, like, let's not do that because they've eaten this much of the market. There's no more market share here. It's just not. There's no point. So position yourself at the exact opposite, because the market on the inverse side, no one has touched, because you've done your market analysis and you know there's this whole group that no one's touching, and it's just sort of not obvious your competitors. So
well,
there's so many ways you can sort of slice up that Venn diagram, right?
yeah. So let's first start off with, I'm a huge fan of the Steve Jobs philosophy of, competitive information, which is, I don't give a shit, right? I don't care what the competitors are doing at all, right? Never look at
That's
them, don't
hilarious.
care about them. If I look at them, they're going to lead me down the wrong way because they're all idiots. That's kind of how he was, right? But we
Yeah,
can't all
it
be
was like that.
geniuses like that, right? And know exactly where the sweet spot is. But there's a lot of important takeaways from that, which is you can over rotate on what the competitors are doing. So I don't like to do that. I like to lightly know where they are, but I don't factor that in very strongly into what we're doing.
Right.
Also, if there's a huge market of opportunity that is sitting there, that doesn't mean we should go get it either, right?
Right.
And it may sound odd at first, but sometimes it's much better to have a partner, a third party partner, to go handle that, fill that gap, because you know where you're going. So I think everything comes back to, what's the strategy that you have at the corporate level? Where are you going? What do you want your product to be? And don't get distracted by these things along the side, right? Like competitors or other opportunities. Stay focused on what you're going after. And the way we do that is first we got to identify where we want to go, and then keep your eye on the outcomes that you want to achieve, and then what are the kinds of metrics we can employ internally to measure whether we're on track with those meeting those outcomes, and then obviously building the product that solves those use cases for the customer. So I think the most important thing is identifying your overall strategy, right? Because everything should
Right.
fall from that. Strategy should
Right.
lead everything.
So if you're so how do you know that? I mean, I guess there's obviously, you know, the idea that you must be very committed to this sort of line, right? That you're going towards.
Hmm.
How do you build that confidence that, hey, this is the right direction I'm going? Is it because you're already? I mean, it depends. If you're already on a ship that's already going in that direction, you just keep going in that direction, right? But how do you know that you're going down a path that's going to lead you towards a better and better, I guess, like
You
net
don't
income,
always know, right? That's the
right?
beauty of I guess I don't know, product management, right? There's risk involved. I think few of us are sitting at the wheel of the ship that you talked about, right? Where we actually can just
Right.
change the whole ship. Most of us, especially in middle management or product management in a product focused team, have a North Star, that the company is aligned around. Hopefully, if you're a successful company and you're managed well, everyone's aligned around some North Star. And then the different product teams have different, sometimes different, we get different products, right, that play a different role in us getting us there. And at that product level, one product team might choose to, attack, by adding new features or something like that. Another team might say, we're going to pull back and we're going to build out our foundation or our frameworks or whatever. So those kind of decisions are the ones I work with, right? Is are we going to go after adding new features and making it easier for, say, developers to build on our platform, or do we want to focus on something else, and
Right.
some other area that would help us still get to the end goal, but might be more important to focus our resources on the, in the near term. So
Right.
those are the kind of decisions we make, and you don't always know if they're right. You do the best you can. You gather data. You double check that these are the things that customers care about. That you have the resources in your staff to solve it. That there aren't any dependencies that are going to block you in being successful, and if there are, figure out how to get through them and resolve them as soon as possible. So that's what I find to be the most fun in the job I have
Right.
is crafting that strategic direction, and then finding ways to get there. And of course, getting a team excited, keeping people motivated, giving young leaders opportunities to grow and learn. And sometimes that can mean fail, right? So you may have some, hopefully small failures, but it's all part of the learning process, right? So I
Right.
strongly encourage, taking risks that are smart risks. And if you fail, then, what did you learn from them, right? We only learn
Right.
when we fail. We don't really learn when we succeed. So if you do fail, it's a good opportunity to learn something.
Let me ask you, basically, sort of how you got into your field right now, sort of where you transitioned from or transitioned to, and why you transitioned. Sort of how do you get into technology in general and end up here?
Yeah, well, I started out actually studying art, visual
That's
arts,
makes a lot of sense.
painting and drawing, right? It's my mom was an artist growing up, so it's kind of what I gravitated toward. I was good in school at two things, drawing and sports. And I wasn't that bad in math, but I didn't apply myself in my younger years. But
Right.
as I went to college, I went to college for art, and I absolutely hated it. They wouldn't let me do what I wanted to do. So someone suggested computer science. I thought, okay, I'll try that, and I loved
But
it.
why did you feel like you wanted to try that from art? Like there's not even an overlapping
Well,
sort of
it was
you
new.
know
Okay, so I'm an old guy, right? So this may seem strange, but it was a new field, right? So people listening
right.
to this today, if you're young, like, what are new fields, right, that you know about, that are just coming up right now? Crypto, or I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff you can get into. Security,
Right.
you know, um, used to be not that long ago was IoT and things like that, fintech.
Right.
There's a lot of really cool new things that are just growing like crazy. Well, also AI, I think would be a really big one. AI and data right now. So if you're, those would be like, that might be interesting. And what's cool about getting into a field when it's really new is that you're all learning at the same time. It's not like, you know, you're going to, studying physics or something like that. If you want to go study physics today, and you want to get a PhD, good luck to you. It's great. But there's been so many, PhDs in physics. It's just a little bit harder. My wife has a PhD in physics, so that's a bad example perhaps, but it's just, it's a very well defined area. Obviously, there's new things happening there. I admit that, but I'm trying to make a point that, like, any of the cool kind of new stuff that comes up, that's kind of why I did it. I was just give it a try, and it turned out I just loved programming. For me, programming was like it was kind of like art, right? You had a blank editor, right? You could kind of
Yeah.
come up with some idea in your head, and then you could code it up. And the cool thing about programming was the computer would tell you if you're right or wrong, right? So it was always this incentive to, like, it would come back saying, syntax error, or you get some funny results like, why is my numbers are not converging? They're going some other way. And then you find some bug in your code, right? And you go back in there and fix it. And I just loved that iterative process of trying to get to perfection. And I had a lot of opportunity to work on really cool things. And so, I just had, like, dream jobs of, working
Like, give
like,
me some examples. Like,
yeah. So the
like
first
what?
one out of college, I got a BS in computer science at UC Riverside, and I worked for a company called Aerojet Electro Systems. And, they did infrared detectors. And I wasn't there very
Nice.
long when there was this lab, on the side that was trying to do some experimental work on fault tolerant detection and onboard, processing, right? These were big terms back in the day. We said, the idea here was you could write code, it would run up on a satellite and do all the cool processing up there, and then just send down a skinny stream of data so that you didn't have to process as much down here. But I looked at all these, infrared returns that were, wherever the satellite was facing. So I got to see, this is during the Cold War, so I got to work on this graphical visual interface with, math coprocessor and graphics engine that was separate from the CPU I was on. So I was managing 3 different CPUs and writing code that was just really, really cutting edge. Loved it, absolutely loved it. And then I left there and went to the RAND Corporation and worked on, I built an animation system. I proposed one to the researchers that were there. that were, asking me. I came in as a developer, right? And, can you write a program that can, take my data and visualize it on a map? Sure, I did that. And then the second guy said, can you write a program, take my data and visualize it on a map? I'm like, no. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a platform where I can take anyone's code because
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And so
Yeah.
the second, third, fourth, and fifth guys all just used my system, and then I ended up, you know, taking that to the Pentagon and installing it there for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They used it for some time, and then just I moonlighted at JPL. I did some great stuff there, doing code for a satellite. So I just had all this awesome experience. And
Yeah.
at one point, a friend of mine, he had a guy we worked with had passed away and in a car accident, and he was running this like a user group. And I decided I'm going to pick it up and take it on, carry the mantle for him. And I loved that. It was like this user group of all these tech people. We'd meet once a month. I'd bring in speakers. I had Michael Crichton come in one time because he wanted to hear the speaker I had talking about animal interfaces and stuff like that. This researcher from Apple that came in and talked. And I found that I was enjoying, the sort of not as much the code, but like what the code could do and communicating with people about, where we could go with the code. And someone said, go back and get, you need to go get a master's. So I went to the UCLA and looked at their master's program in computer science. And, I looked at the curriculum and it's like, I forget what the courses were. I'll just make stuff up, but like multi-processing did that, graphical, did that. And I just went down and down, compilers. I built my own languages. I wrote my own animation language. So I felt like, gosh, if I take the master's of computer science, my previous 5 years of working at Aerojet and Rand, I had done all those things already. So it was
Right.
incremental benefit. And similar to when someone said, why don't you go and take computers? Someone kind of randomly said, why don't you go get an MBA? And I was like, oh, well, what is that? I didn't really know. I heard of it. So I went to UCLA and looked at their MBA program and, accounting, marketing, management, leadership, all this stuff, finance. It's like, I didn't have any of this. Every single class was like 100% value add.
Right.
So I applied, got in, and the rest is history.
Straight into product. It sounds like you got really good really fast in software because you never did it before. You did it in college for a few years, and you're writing your
Well,
own languages, writing your
I
own
was a real
compilers.
overachiever when I was younger. So even when I was in college learning computers, I worked part-time putting myself through school at a chemical plant.
Right.
And I went into the chemical plant and I told them that, you guys should, because they would give us these batch tickets to make this big recipe in these big bins, right? It was urethane foam. And I would say, why don't we just put all this on a computer? And they're like, you could just kind of dial up the formula you want, hit a button, and it would print out the recipe sheet instead of some chemist having to write it down every time and figure out, oh, this is a 2,000-pound batch versus a 3,000-pound batch. So let me adjust all the percentages, So it's like, that's dumb. They would do that by hand. So it was really like, it's just screaming for an application to be built.
An optimization.
Yeah. And I was like 2 classes in and I'm like, I can build that for you. And they're like, oh, okay. So they were stupid enough to take a chance. They went and they bought an Apple III computer.
Nice.
I had never programmed on an Apple before. I was working on Unix machines at the university. So I said, Apple III, no problem. I can do it. Give me the manual. So I took the manual home on Friday and came back on Monday and started writing code in BASIC. And I built them a system. So I just learned, you just look for those little opportunities and grab them.
That was a good start because that was basically a calculator. So
yeah, it was exactly.
It's a nice little small program that you could. It was feasible. You weren't completely out of into another stratosphere with that.
Yeah,
so that's not bad.
It wasn't too bad.
Yeah. Okay. So, obviously you've been in all these places and done all these, I think personally pretty cool things. I have to say, and a lot of them are foundational to computer science, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, now that you're in product, what's your perspective on innovation relative to of the goals of the organization from a profit point of view? Because you definitely understand the flip side where this is the 4th button we've built and I'm tired of that, or whatever it is that they're building, versus we do need to build this button because this button is a $4 million button, right? You're about to build
a $4 million. Well,
so go ahead and build it.
Innovation is at the core of almost everything we do, right? I mean, it's
right.
If you're not innovating, you're not moving forward. You're staying where you are, right? And based on just our economy is it's a capitalistic economy. I mean, someone else wants your lunch, right? And that's the way it's going
Right.
to be. And
Yeah.
whatever problems we're trying to solve, whatever ring we're trying to reach and grab, we're always asking ourselves. This is true at every company I worked with, especially in product. This is important. I encourage the product managers I work with to, sometimes engineers might be inventing something new and they don't realize it. Oh, well, say we got this really hard problem to solve. They go in a room with the architects, they figure out some solution, and they start to implement it, and they report on it. And like the product manager's like, did you talk? Did anyone go over with legal whether to check in with legal to see if this is innovative, this is worthy of a patent, right? So that's a really important muscle to flex. Okay,
Right.
because innovation's happening all the time, and some of it's completely novel and
Hmm.
something that you want to protect.
Okay. So have you always had the opportunity to sort of support that, or have you always picked companies that were in that direction? Because it's not true everywhere.
Well, it's true. It is true everywhere that a company that's thinking about innovating, and looking for those opportunities is going to do better than one that might be, innovating but not trying to protect their innovations. I think that's a truism. Um,
Fair enough.
I have worked for companies where we were innovating and not protecting our, IP. One particular startup I worked for, and I look back at it now, so I probably could have had like half a dozen patents, but didn't really have the culture at the time to do it. And we were small, and honestly, I didn't think of it. And this is something I look back and think, God, why didn't we do that? Many years ago, we were innovating on cell phones, doing 3D mobile characters, kind of, or mobile, not mobile, 3D interactive emojis of yourself. Like you could record a funny message and send it to your friends, and you could pick any character you wanted to say it, stuff like that. And
Okay.
we built cool technology to capture the facial motion from a regular digital camera, and our team did have patents around that, the engineering and team. But what we failed to patent was some of the cool stuff we did with lip syncing, and and it's all patented now. I went back and looked
Yeah, you would
years
have.
years
Yeah.
after we did it, so we were actually did it first. So it kind of was a lesson learned,
Right.
that when you're doing some really cool shit, it's important to go check and see, hey, has anyone ever done this before? Because we were basically improving the 3D morph targets, and the way the 3D worked around the mouth. We were
Right.
improving it, not just by the picking up the motion by the visual, but we would actually listen to the audio, and then we knew that the certain sounds and phonemes in the audio
Would match certain
should
movements.
have
Yeah.
certain positions in the mouth, the tongue, the face, the lips, and
Right.
the throat. And we were taking that information and then adjusting the 3D graphics accordingly, and it got so much better. It got to the point where, instead of looking like the mouth was going like,
Right.
just
Right.
flapping, it would actually, you could see the tongue moving, the lips, pursing and stuff like that. So
Right.
it was really, really cool. So
Was this
innovation.
something you were working on yourself, or were
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
sort
No,
of? Oh, you were
me and a
doing
team
that.
were doing that. And
Right.
we were doing it, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years before the patents ever showed up. It wasn't
Well,
patented when we were doing it.
so let me ask you, so you did all this, and you sort of felt like getting an MBA was really valuable for you
Hmm.
because it was sort of net new information, just
Yeah.
in principle before you started it. So when you went through that process, how did you feel after and during, before you sort of
Oh,
moved on?
yeah. So you were asking me about, how was that transition from becoming an engineer and getting an MBA, and what was that like?
All right.
And I had here I was, this engineer, had all this cool, background. One of the stories I didn't tell you was I worked at this little startup where we did real time full body and facial motion capture at the same time. I got my picture
Right.
at National Geographic because we were doing such cool, innovative stuff.
Wow.
Um, but when I got my MBA, I was actually kind of frightened, to be honest with you, because I felt, you have that imposter syndrome people talk about, like, I was
Right.
now an MBA, I'm supposed to know business and finance, right? But I felt like
Right.
I could code like crazy, but I wasn't super confident yet in my ability to understand business concepts.
Right.
with just a few years of education. So I had an opportunity to work at the time. This is like the coolest company was Silicon Graphics. This is back in the mid 90s. I got my MBA,
Right.
and they came to campus, and I, as was the normal process, the students would put down bids for who they wanted to interview. You got like 100 points. You could put your 100 points and spread them out across, Apple, HP, Silicon Graphics, whatever.
Right.
Facebook and those companies didn't exist back then, and Google. But I'd put down all 100 points on Silicon Graphics. It was the coolest, hottest company, and plus I did all this visual 3D computer graphic stuff, so it was a no-brainer. Anyway, when I got my interview time and they found that I put down all 100 points on it, they were like, you're the guy that put down 100 points, because they had heard about it, because I only wanted to interview with one company.
Yeah.
And so that impressed them, and they said they had
That impressed them because it's just the commitment level. They just like that.
Yeah. In fact, the secretary at the university was trying to tell me, like, Larry, the highest person that bid on STI is like 40 points. You could put down 40 points and guarantee a spot and still interview with Apple. I was like, I don't want to work for Apple. If I did, I'd probably be a millionaire today and stayed with them. But
yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to go. I knew where I wanted to go, so I put 100 down against everyone's recommendation, and that impressed them because they had somehow heard of it when my time came up. But also with all my graphics experience, they told me, "Look, Larry, we came here with 3 jobs openings that are for product managers." And each of the directors in SGI for these openings, they all want to hire you.
Right.
So I said, "Oh, wow, that's fantastic." So they said, "Why don't you just tell us which one you want?" And I said, "Well, what are they?" The first one is the 3D graphics APIs. Okay, so I'm like, "Oh, that's my jam, right?
Yeah,
Technology, graphics, programming." Okay, the second one was virtual reality evangelist. I'm like,
It sounds
it's
religious.
okay. Yeah, it's a brand new. This was the virtual reality the first time it came around,
Right.
30 years ago or whatever now. And so it was kind of young, and not a lot of promise, or a lot of hype, but not a lot of real business being made, money being made. And so I'm like, okay, what's the third option? And it's like M&A, mergers and acquisitions. Want to talk with you because you have insight into this cool startups and stuff that's going on, and that could be valuable.
Right.
And like the latter two were scary to me. I'm like, oh, so I decided, what? I like that API one, because that's I know I can kick ass there.
Right.
So looking back at, the M&A one might have also taken me on a different path,
it would have been interesting to see you on the M&A one now. When I think about it.
But I've just loved technology so much. So I've always stayed in that space. In fact, I've had 2 opportunities in my career to, for VP roles, and I turned them both down. They were not at the right times in my life, with little kids and stuff like that. But also, I like
product or technology
in product. But I really liked staying close to the tech. I just being right with the engineers all the time. That's where I was most happy.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. So, for basically, you were able to gather those skills and basically take what you already have and just move forward with that, but with a bit more perspective. So it sounds like it just gave you a lot more perspective.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So if you talk about specifically the role of director of product, and you talk about what it is to sort of translate what you know to the people below you, and translate what you're hearing to yourself. So you're sort of in the middle there, trying to understand what the company needs and what direction you're going and things of that nature, and then translating that message to people below you so that they can actually do their jobs, and so they can do it in a way that they to some degree translate into a language that they understand, because a lot of it, each tier has its own jargon that they do and don't use. So could you speak a little bit about that, how that how you do that, or how you think that's best done?
Well, that's a good one. I think that comes down to communication, right? And some of it depends a little bit on, what the company culture is, and but
how does company culture affect that?
I've worked well. Some companies are a little more open than others in terms of inviting feedback on the strategy, right? Some might want to say, "This is where we're going," and don't ask me why, or don't question my math. Where Other companies, especially Procore, where I am now, they're completely open. This is where we're going, and if any of you have any comments or questions about it, bring it on, right? And then
Right,
people
right,
do, like the culture hire. We're people that say, I don't think this is right. Let's dive into it and push on it, right? So
right, right,
it's very open that way. In fact, it's one of our corporate values is openness.
right,
So, but there's other places where they're not quite that much. So I think that's
right,
that's what I mean by that. But communicating up is really about understanding what the interests and needs are of that group,
right,
right? It's budget, it's money, it's time, it's innovation, it's stuff like that.
right.
Often money, it's like back.
It
I'll
is a
say that one
business.
twice. Well, yeah, because that's more the area. It's still strategy, but where are we investing is important. And then when you're talking to the team, beneath you, hierarchically, I don't like to think of it beneath me, but like in the hierarchy, the rank and file folks, like they're on the front lines. They're actually doing the real work, right? So
Right, right,
helping them understand why we're doing this or why we're not doing something that everyone wants to do. Um, the better you can communicate that, the more successful your teams are going to be. Like sometimes an engineer, I've gotten this question once or twice in various interviews or whatever, but sometimes engineering will want to go build something and they'll be really excited about it, but there's zero market value for that, perhaps, right?
right,
And how do you handle that kind of um, situation? And it's
right,
all about it's all about understanding what that other person wants and needs. Right? Sometimes they want to be free to innovate and create cool stuff. Well, that's great. But I know that I've never met an engineer that didn't want their stock price to go up.
right,
So it's like, you can just have logical conversations about, well, we could go down this route, but it's, there's no money there. And yeah, maybe you could file a few patents, but it's not an area we want to protect. And, you know, if we go in this direction, I bet there's some creative problems you can solve. Right. So I think,
right.
engineers, especially, this is true for most people, but I found, really good engineers want to keep learning and growing
Yeah.
and innovating. So you got to find ways that they can do that in the direction that makes sense for the business.
So how do you sort of have that how do you have that conversation, right? Where I mean, I guess there's a little bit of disappointment there, and you may not always have something to trade. Where this is interesting, I know you like this, but here's this, and it does what, and it gives you the that kick you're looking for, or increases your stock, like you're saying. Like, how do you do you
Um,
kick it to request down the
Creativity,
line?
you got to be creative, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it's
What
got
does
to
that
be creative.
entail?
Like it entails understanding, like where are the challenges in the current role that we have. Now, it
Right,
could be the case that you have someone, in the wrong role, right? And that can happen where there's no challenge you can present to them in this direction that's of any interest to them. And then
right,
that becomes more of a, how do you manage them to be the most effective for your company? And if it's not the role they're in, let's find a role that they can do where they can add a lot
right,
of value for the company, right? So I'm, that's been my philosophy is, throughout my whole career is helping people, deliver as much value as they can for the company as a whole. And sometimes that's
right,
outside of my team, trying to transfer someone to somewhere else where they can really follow their dream.
right.
I think managers that say nope, you got to do this job, like it or get out, and people just end up, they'll say okay, okay, great, I'll do this job, and then they just start looking for another job and they leave, right? And then
Right,
all
right,
that institutional knowledge that they might have walks right out the door with them, and it takes you another
right,
2 years to build that up with someone else.
right, right. Well,
So
speaking of following your dreams, where can people follow you?
where can they follow me?
Yeah, where can they find you?
They can find me. Well, I'm in the process of backing out of Twitter, um, but if that's what you're talking about, I'm on
So,
LinkedIn.
okay. Well, thank you, Larry, for coming, and it's great learning from you and great talking to you.
Thank you. This is a pleasure.
All right, take care.
Bye.